This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Got me as a it's got Wendy Shipman as the presenter. Okay. But everybody was able to log in. Okay, so that's good. All right, so welcome everyone. Come on in. Welcome here for those of you who are online. If you can tell, yes, I am completely wet. It is raining very hard here in Chicago. Rain jacket did not cut it today. But anyway, welcome to everyone. And we are going to talk about, mute everybody. We're going to talk about character strengths. We're going to do part 3 today and start to look at strengths in others. And so the first thing that I want to do is ask you, how did you use your strengths in a new way last week? That was the task and what you wrote about on the discussion board, but just want to know if anybody is willing to share. I'm going to turn the chats where I can see them. Anybody online, feel free to chat in the chat box. Yeah.
I kind of talked about it a little last week too, but I definitely try to use my gratitude a little more when it comes to like schoolwork. So I'm very big paper due this week, and so instead of complaining about it, I try to like use my gratitude a little bit more and be appreciative of what I'm getting out of writing that 40-page paper.
Okay. All right. So great. So Taylor's saying that she used gratitude, and with a big paper coming up, instead of complaining and looking at the negative, right, which we all tend to do, looking at what she's going to get out of it and being thankful for that, right? And how did that shift the load of the work? I'm sure you felt differently when you were.
It definitely made me feel better about it at the end. I think the normal, sometimes like I'm pretty hard on myself and like making sure it sounds the way I want it to, but after like rereading it a few times, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that really does feel better. So.
Okay, so it felt better, and it felt better at the end. Good, that's a great example. Anybody else?
You can correct me if I'm wrong. So I like posted that, like I really try to focus on my last 2 strengths, which are bravery and humility, which I really have like, what definitely not really was. Because I mean, you think like, oh, they humiliated me, like it's something bad or something. But I said I try to incorporate those two by honoring what I've been blessed to accomplish and using it as a platform to like bring people together. So like when I would go like out, like some of my friends who went out last night, even when I go out, like they're like more hesitant to talk to people. But like I'm a people person, so I don't mind talking to people. It was like, kind of like just meshing everything well, like maybe something said wrong, just like, oh, that's not what it meant, like that's not gonna take it like that, like stuff like that. Does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's 2 interesting points you're bringing up. One, you went down to the bottom of your strength. So instead of, and I think the exercise was like using one of your top strengths in a new way. But what you did is you brought 2 of the bottom, and I hear you talking about it, like sort of incorporating it with some of your other top strengths. But you really chose to focus on being brave. And then, for the humility, I think it's being humble. So not taking credit, which it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes when to me, humility can kind of get crossed with being negative. Right. So maybe if you're always like, being really optimistic, as we learned in the PsyCat portion, that I can see it being crossed with that. But it sounds like you were able to use 2 and kind of bring them up along with some of your other strengths of being a people person. Yeah. Hey. So you guys are just in time. We're talking about ways you use strength, and I'm gonna look online because I missed this one. Okay. So Elaine says, last week I used bravery and spirituality. It was wonderful, calmly powerful. This week I'm using self-regulation, my lowest strength. Okay, so see, Elaine's doing the same thing you are. With spirituality, my highest strength by focusing on implementing discipline with faith. It's more difficult than the week before, and that's right. Remember, whenever you're not using your top strengths, you're whacking through the brush on the side of the road, right? I'm overtired from the weekend at school. Me too, Elaine. I taught both days. And it's always hard for me to make changes when I'm exhausted. This may be a good time to rest and let it go. And Sonette just left, but I'd also like to say it is Mercury retrograde, which I don't know much about, but I am learning from Sonette. So according to that, yes, you should let it go.
I don't understand, but a lot of people, I feel a lot of people like on retrograde.
You'll have to ask Sonette. She's the expert.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. So anybody else before I move on? Okay, so this week we're going to talk about recognizing strengths in others. So you've had 2 weeks practicing with yourself what your strengths are and how you leverage them. And then, so just gaining awareness and then how to use them. Now we're going to talk about recognizing strengths in others. So the first thing I'm going to cover is your biases and why you miss strengths, why we're not doing this all the time. Then we're going to work on developing a practice of calling out strengths. And then we're going to look to utilize 3 tools of relationship management with strengths. Okay, so why aren't we doing this all the time? Why aren't we just walking around, pointing out people's strengths, uplifting others? Well, it turns out we have 4 cognitive biases. Nothing new to all of you psych students. You've heard of these before, but I just want to refresh. The first and the most important being negativity bias. And again, remember, our primal brain wants to see the saber-toothed tiger in the bushes. We need to be on alert for danger. But now we're in a society where that's just not true, and danger is not lurking on every corner. But here we are in the office and in school, and we're still looking for danger, right? So we have this predisposition to see what's wrong. And I've mentioned this a bunch before, but to me, it's clearest. It's like I walk in my house, I should be like, and I am like, well, it's so good to see my family. And I say that, and then I'm like, okay, and the coats are on the floor, and the muddy boots are on the blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I'm just listing off 15 things in my head that I need to clean up, right? That we're not done. Right. So my brain just works that way. Right. And the shift is coming in the door and seeing what they've done right. Right. Because they've done both. But my negativity bias is like, nobody did anything right. Everybody's just fooling around, jumping on the furniture and acting like a fool. And all this stuff is not done. Right. So that's the negativity bias. The second thing is selective attention. Once we've made a first impression or once we have an idea about people, we filter out all contradictory evidence that would tell us otherwise, right? So especially when I do this with corporate managers, if you feel like somebody's a low performer, when we go through this, they can really find places where they are performing well, but they've got it in their mind that they're not. And so you have to really examine your categories and the way you're stereotyping people, and think about what's the other evidence, right? So being aware that we're cognitive misers and we're filtering out information. The third one is binary thinking. And this is, again, where we're kind of like people are good or they're bad. And what we really know is there's somewhere in the middle. Nobody's all good, nobody's all bad. But again, cognitive miser, in order for us to not spend so much glucose in our brain, we just put people into categories and we kind of ignore the neutral, right? So if you think back to the loving kindness exercise that we did, remember the loving kindness meditation? That's to get you out of your binary thinking. So you focus on what you love, people that you maybe don't love and have a hard time with, and then neutral people. And do you remember how hard it was? Because you literally file them away in a closet. You don't see it. You only pay attention to good and bad. So that loving kindness meditation really kind of brings you out to pay attention to the neutral and to have more complexity in your thinking. And the last one is projection, right? And all of you clinicians know about this better than I do. But projection is where the thing that you don't like in yourself, you more readily see in other people. And so, you know, when my children are being messy, it really irritates me because it's also, and I really focus on them being messy to kind of really protect myself from dealing with my messiness, right? And I've also noticed in my 15 years of teaching, you know, you always interact with different personalities, and there'll always be a personality that just sets me off, and I notice it and I catch it, and I'm like, you know, I can really list 10 reasons why this person's irritating me, and then I realize that's exactly who I was when I started graduate school, exactly. And so, you know, and it gets me because it's you know, it's a way for me to project my stuff onto them and not have to deal with, and then really sitting with that humbleness of what it was like and kind of thinking about how maybe my peers saw me or how teachers saw me, not the way I want them to see me now, but, you know, in my irreverent 23-year-old self, how I was behaving. So anyway, those are the 4 things that, okay, and Elaine says, are these defaults related to fast and slow thinking? Have that book, have not read it yet, but my guess would be yes. Okay, so what I want you to do is, there's something called a strength switch where you start to see, you start to look for what's right? So when there's a problem, when your brain's kind of like, whoop, you know, like honoring that part of your brain that there's a problem, that's your signal. That's your signal to look for the strength. So the minute you see that, feel that kind of like, okay, this is my negativity bias or whichever one of these kicking in, remember, okay, there's a problem. Where's the hidden strength that I'm not seeing? And one of the key ways to look for this is to connect with the person, right? So that feeling can also be a sense of disconnection. So, you know, we worked on this a little bit in the first one. Remember when I think I did it with this class. We did something where there was somebody that you had a challenge with and you had to think of their strength. Did I do that? No, maybe I think I did that in a different training. Well, maybe let's do that now. So let's think of somebody that maybe you have a hard time getting along with, or you get along fine, but they don't know it, but they really irritate you. And I want you to try to find their hidden strength. And so I want you to pair up. I think we've got pairs today. And then think about who this person is and, you know, maybe one of the 4 things that is in play for you. Oh, look at this look Sanat's given me. I'm getting evil eyes from Sanat. And then I want you to think about what their hidden strength is. So kind of maybe what your bias is first, and then what the hidden strength is. And online, you guys can just type in. Stop sharing this screen for a second.
Unless you just got 6 years. Like to me, like she's an attack. I guess that's not her position. She persevered. But that's not thinking on. I think sometimes can seem self-centered, so like. So, but I always noticed that like one thing that's strong and stretches person is love. They're very and I think viewing in that way has helped me like just downplay this is not ready. And like just recognizing that they're really just something considerate. That's helped me a lot. A lot of people are ready to be absolutely. It's like, and you're like, you're like neutral, and they're like, yeah. Yeah. I just think that's them. They don't have other aspects of things to offer, but yeah, it's not. I think we focus on the biggest things. It doesn't feel like it's like a lot to the less like yeah. 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 Well, I think there's that. Oh, yeah. And I think it helps to see them outside of the context of your interaction. So if you see something positive, like in an organization or like on campus or whatever, you get to see other sides to them. Because some people bring on saying, I just want an issue with you, but they give you the worst side. This is yeah. 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 It's really nice.
Okay, so who is willing to share? Did anybody pick up on any biases that were occurring? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And a lot of nodding heads in the room. A lot of kind of laughter, some nodding heads. So okay, people and online people are also picking up on their biases. Were you able to come up with a hidden strength? Maybe one that you hadn't seen before? Took a long time.
Something that I noticed for my person was they used their strengths in excess.
Ah, we kind of had a discussion about that too. Online, well, something similar where we were talking about people who are really kind in one aspect and then bullying another. Like they're kind of, it's like it's okay, I'm being kind here, I can bully here. So we were talking about calling on, kind of using that tool of you're so kind to group A or person A over here, and I know you can extend some of that kindness to person B. Like what you're doing is you're just drawing on, you're highlighting the good in them, and then requesting to extend it to somebody maybe that they're having trouble extending it to, just like we're all having trouble like finding this hidden strength in a person.
Maybe my person, that's why I'm annoyed with him. Maybe he uses his strength and access as well. So man, I was telling her he's very friendly, he's very nice, he's extremely talkative, and that's what that's what I don't want to talk all the time. Like he's always in he's in my building, he's always in the computer room, like always. And like sometimes I just want to do my work and like I'll have stuff to do, so I need to concentrate. I don't have time to talk right now. We can talk later. Well, not really, but it's just like he always wants to conversate.
Right. Well, you know what I also noticed with myself and some of the things that I'm saying is a lot of times when the behavior is coming towards us, it's something we don't like, and we're not calling it out. We're not setting a boundary around ourselves, which is not what I'm teaching in this class. That's what you clinical folks teach. But that's what I notice is when I'm getting irritated, it's because like a boundary's being right, and I'll be honest with you, like I'm not brave enough to tell somebody I don't have time to talk with them, right? But that is the honest and kind thing to do, right?
Yeah. Because I'll avoid going to the amenities for because he's always there.
Right.
Always there. And it really bothers me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, when I started thinking about it, I realized that when you dislike someone, you're less likely to like get to know them. So how do we to get to know their strengths?
All right, this is really key. So she's saying when you dislike somebody, it's hard to get to know them, right? Because it's hard. So therefore, it's hard to find their strengths because you don't want to know about them. And I don't think I shared it here, but I shared it somewhere this week, maybe last week. Did we talk about no, it was with Jay. It was in the last class. Jimmy Carter. And one of the things that struck me is I saw him in an interview, and he said of his wife of 50 years, because he's 94, Jay let us know. He said, I'm still getting to know her. I get to know her, something new about her every day. And I was just struck by how beautiful that was, and that he wasn't taking her for granted. And kind of thinking about in the people that we know the most, we think, I know you, I know what you're like, I'm going to put you in this category, and I'm not going to think about you any further. So any other information that's coming up, so not only people that we don't like, but people that we're very familiar with, like trying to keep that curiosity about what they're really like, and they're changing over time, right? So I think that's a really important point. And we just turn it off. We're not interested in learning anymore about you.
This might be a question for the clinical things. But I'm curious, you made a point about, like, when we say curious about people, like the comment that Jay made about his wife. Do you think that there is a part of him that stays curious about himself? You know, meaning, you know. Like,
well, he's such a wonderful person. I would have to say so.
Okay.
I mean, he's like cured parasites in children. I mean, everything he's done has been to help other people. And so I think that much new thing, he Habitat for Humanity. I mean, all the things he's done. I would have to imagine he's a pretty curious person.
Yeah, because I think like if you are one to understand like your self involvement and you're constantly growing and you realize that just different stuff, if you have really high self actualization, or just I don't know what it's called, but when you really tap into yourself, I think that just as a mirror, like you understand also that others are growing as well.
Right. So I think what you're saying is people who are curious with themselves, right, would then tend to be curious with others. And so maybe even like people we dislike, people we're familiar with, and with ourselves, we're not being curious, right? Which, remember, curiosity is the antidote to fixed mindset, right? So, and it's also one of the things to mindfulness is being curious. So it's curiosity solves a lot of things. Yeah, somebody had their hand up.
You actually pretty much covered it. I was going to attach this to the growth mindset, and I think that if you have that pathway and it's a well-traveled pathway of having a growth mindset and being curious about things, then you most likely are curious about yourself and other people.
Right.
That's increasing compassion too.
Right, and for me, that came with meditation, right? So the discipline of focusing on your breath put the gap in between what was happening and my sports casting coming in to tell me what was happening, right? So that's where I like developed that ability. So for me, it was that steady practice of meditation, which again is just, strengthening the muscles in my mind to put a pause in and then be more curious than just go to snap judgment. Okay. Yeah, Kaz says it's so easy to say, but so hard to do. Yes, that is very true. Okay. So the next thing that I want to tell you all about, as soon as I find the next thing I want to tell you about is strength spotting. And this is where we begin to intentionally look in others. And so in corporate trainings, I would say before you head into your next meeting or your next conversation at work, remind yourself to look for the best in people, right? And so I've heard a couple of different ways of doing it where people start at the beginning of the meeting and just kind of, write something down about each person in the meeting. I've seen someone else who has a clip on her briefcase or backpack, and when she's packing up for work, she also reflects and thinks on the day. So it just kind of closes out her day thinking about what strengths she saw. So you want to put this cue reminder in, and next week we're going to work on making a habit, so we'll work a little bit more on that. But you want to set cues and alarms to remind you to look for strengths. And again, going back to when you're using a strength, you're energized and engaged. So when you see people get energized and engaged, that should be your clue. Watch body language and speech patterns. And you want to write down your hunch, see if you see it again. But again, be careful not to pigeonhole people. They're this, and that's it, and I'm done. It's just this constant. They've got 5, 6, 7. They've got constant ones. So, and then also be mindful that when you're doing this, when you recognize strengths in others, you're inducing positive emotions in yourself. So it feels good to do. So it's a boost. And then what we want to work to is getting in this habit of calling out other people's strengths. And this also sets the stage for constructive feedback. So you can imagine for managers, when you're seeing somebody's strengths and constantly calling them out for it, when you have to have constructive feedback, it's not a problem because you've built up, remember that positivity ratio? You've built up so much trust and connection with this person that it's easy to ask for something or to ask them to do something a different way. Okay, so the next activity, I want you to think about the next few days. What do you have coming up? Meetings, practicum, internship, work, whatever it is. And I want you to just take a minute to yourself to jot down a specific plan to notice and call out strengths in others. What will be your cue? What will remind you to do this? So I'll give you a minute to think about it, and then we'll share.
But I have to email them. I wasn't on it before. I have just
Oh. Okay, so once you've written down your plan, then share it with your partner.
Because I think explore your own reaction to it and why you react in that way, and then as ways to pull out questions.
A lot of ways for teams thinking about specific things. So this week we don't have
even like other because I feel like it's something I something and enjoy myself and help others enjoy themselves as well.
Okay, so all of you guys, make sure you're kind of identifying what your cue is to remind you to do this. Like, what's the thing in the physical environment that's going to remind you?
Yeah. When people speak about their own capabilities, I want to say about themselves and their not recognizing their strength, maybe that you think it's really well. Yeah. And then when you do, like, when they do speak about it, encourage them first. And then when you encourage them, encourage yourself.
Okay, so let me bring this back really quick, and I'm getting some great questions about the cues. So remember, the heart of this exercise is you want to get something to remind yourself. Like, it's easy for me to say, for example, I'm going to say, and I was sharing this online, this weekend I intend to call out strengths in my family, right? I will walk out of this class. I will teach this class twice, and I will walk out of here and forget it. Bet you $100. There's like no way I'll remember it. So what is the cue? What is the thing that's going to make me remember? And some of you may be better at this than I am in terms of remembering. But there's something that reminds you, and it can be at the start of a meeting, like I said, or something on your backpack, or some, a vibration, an alarm, maybe like if you have a regular prayer, like when you start into prayer, or maybe when you come out of prayer, like something that you kind of already do. You don't want to make anything difficult, right? I came up with, for me, because I know this works, I love like to-do lists and crossing it off. So I'm just going to put my little clipboard, because I kind of have like the things that I want to remember to emulate with my kids, you know, just kind of remind myself so that when they get crazy, I don't get crazy as well. But like kind of just draw a blank space, 1, 2, 3 for each person, and put their name. And like my goal is by the end of the weekend, I've spotted 3 strengths for each person, because if I can just write it down, I'll see it. And then I'll be like, I'm not doing that. I haven't done that for 2 days. And then I'll start to do it. And then once I start doing it, I know in me, I like to finish that list. So that will move me. So I just came up with that brainstorm, but you're looking for that cue, right? Because otherwise we forget. Yeah.
Mine was using the thing on my watch. It buzzes at 50 minutes an hour if I haven't stood up in a while.
Ah.
I'm at my desk for a long time. So I sit for a long time. So when that goes off, I decided to think about the strengths that I've seen in the people that have been around me for the last hour.
Great. So she's saying her watch buzzes at 50 minutes to the hour. And that's going to be her cue to think about the strengths. Maybe like if you're in a meeting, like what's going on, but if it's past, then what's happening in the past, right? Good, that's a great one. I'm trying to figure out how to get a vibrating something or other on there is, so yeah. Oh, yeah, Taylor.
I was thinking more into like the next couple of weeks too, because we have a lot of group projects coming up, which are not usually my favorite things, but I figured in that sense I can identify the strengths of the people that I'm working with, based on like their initiative or contribution or whatever. And then in one of the classes we have a feedback sheet that we have to fill out, so that can kind of be like my cue to remember like, okay, there's strengths.
Okay, great. So Taylor's saying they're going into group sessions, which again, not just you, a lot of people, this causes stress. We have to figure out how to work with one another. And we have to always, like, you know, is somebody socially loafing? Is somebody doing too much? So what she's saying is she's going to use this group work to remind her to see the strengths in others, and especially when they do the evaluation of the person, writing that down. And I guarantee you, Taylor, if you're in that meeting and you're calling out people's strengths, you'll notice the positive environment and it will shift towards the better. So report back on that. I'm confident that will work really well. Okay, so there's 3 tools I want to tell you about really quickly. So one of the things, and I especially do this in leadership development, you don't work on your weaknesses or your lower strengths. You resource them. You get them around you, right? So like if you're not a details person and you're a leader or you're working on a team, get that person that is a details person, right? So you want to complement yourself with the people around you. And I think that's something that Sunette is like very intentional on. And when we work together, she's always pointing out how we work together well, right? How our, you know, we don't have the same strengths and we complement each other. So you want to be able to do that. The second thing is tailoring communications. So you want to wield some influence with this new knowledge that you have about strengths. And when you're writing people and you're making that ask, you want to appeal to their strengths. And so, you know, I'm thinking of a corporate training I did a couple weeks ago, and I noticed that everybody, you know, it's a social service agency. They're helping people. I noticed there was predominant of love at the top, right? And so if I wanted to write them, let's say I needed to ask them to fill out a training evaluation, or I needed them to do something for me, I would really couch all of my language in their strength of love, like the love for the, you know, getting better, really highlighting what's important to them. So when you're writing somebody, when you're talking to somebody, you can really pull on their strengths to engage them, and I say wield some influence in a nice way. You're not trying to bully or dominate, but you really are trying to get, you know, for me, I'm trying to get my training evals done, and nobody wants to fill those out, right? So it's like the course evaluations. Okay, and then the third thing is to remember that when you are having difficulties with somebody, it could be a strengths collision. And a really good example I have is if somebody's top one is, it's not fun, what is it? Humor, right? And then they're working with someone whose top strength is perseverance, and they're working on a team project together. They're going to most likely collide, as the top humor person is going to be using humor and, you know, being very relaxed about this, and the perseverance person is going to be driving toward it. And so what you can do is you can just call it out and say, hey, you know, I love to use humor to get work done. That's how I do it. And I see that you are really dedicated and you have this really strong sense of perseverance and duty, or whatever it is. And how about, like, every 30 minutes, we're going to cut loose, right? And then I'm going to honor your, you know, like, but bringing it in. But I think just calling it out, I work this way and you work this way, then it's like, okay, this isn't personal, right? We're just trying to get the same, you know. And I think that's the other thing, is most people really care, and they're just trying to do it the way that they know how to do it best. So these three things, resourcing strengths, tailoring communications, and being mindful of strength collisions, are three tools to help you into the next week. So this coming week, what's your specific plan to call out strengths? So you kind of did an initial one. Tell us how that worked. And then also, I want to know, are you able to resource strengths? Were you able to tailor communications or identify any strengths? You know, were you able to use any of these three tools? Any questions? No? All right. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to answer some questions online, I see.
Everyone get a chance to fill out the application? Okay, and everybody is connected and captured. Everybody, okay, great. Thank you.
Anything if you watch the video online?
What now?
I don't think if you watch the video online.
Yeah, just comment on the discussion board like you do every week. So then she's going to go through and add people who comment to the discussion board, so that way we don't have to keep track of who, like, came to class and who didn't. And then we'll just, yeah. Nope, that's it.
And so
Okay, so Elaine, you're asking for another example. If you're still there, let me make sure you're still there. Yeah, you're there. Okay, so basically when you know, another example would be like, if I'm really, you know, my strength is love of learning, and I'm really approaching something from a learning aspect, and I want people to learn, and, you know, not everybody's like that. They don't like to read books and learn and, you know, be a nerd like I like to. And so if they're really like an action-oriented person, or like taking action, and I'm wanting to learn more, like, we could be colliding, right, when we're working on a project together. So think about, and I think it's like not so much that you collide in your personality, but when you're trying to achieve something together and you're going about it in a different way. Does that help? Yeah, more work style than person. Yeah, and the disc is a good way to look at that too, another way. Okay, thank you guys online for coming. All right, I'm going to sign off. I'll see you guys next week.
Well, you two enjoy your weekend.